Today, Hamas released the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages, said to include a mother and her 2 young children who have long been feared dead following the terror group's attack on October 7th, 2023. Gazans lined the streets and cheered as the bodies of hostages were transported for the handoff. Red Cross vehicles were at the scene in Gaza to accept the bodies and return them to Israel. The remains were said to be Shiri Bibas, her children Ariel and Kafir, as well as Oded Lifshitz, who was 83 when he was abducted. A spokesperson for Benjamin Netanyahu explained this morning that the bodies still have to be forensically identified.
The coffins were transferred to the National Institute of Forensic Medicine for official identification, where they currently are. The IDF are accompanying the families of the deceased at this unbearable time. The National Institute for Forensic Medicine will confirm identities as efficiently and as respectfully as possible, with the priority being our responsibility and compassion for the families. After initially informing their families, information will be shared through official channels.
We're now joined by Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, Israel's Special Envoy for Trade and Innovation and former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Now, this is obviously an incredibly traumatic day for the people of Israel. What has the response been from the Israeli public? And does the parading of these bodies make Israelis less interested in keeping the ceasefire going?
Well, I actually think, on the contrary, today has been a very, very sad day. Everybody is in national mourning. You know, and Israel is a very small country. And so when you have a situation like this, everybody feels that these are their children. So there were people lining up the whole way, the whole journey of the dead bodies going into the forensics center, where they're going to be checked to see and to confirm that they are who we think that they are. And they were lined with people with flags and singing songs and mourning songs. And so it's a very sad day to Israel, especially because when you think about it, these babies were kidnapped. The youngest was 9 months old. So imagine what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an enemy who would kidnap a mother and her babies, a 9-month-old, and at the time a 3-year-old. And it's something that is very difficult for us to grasp and to start healing from. And of course, this is an ongoing injury because we still have almost 70 hostages left. We believe half of them are alive.
Now, I want to ask you about the Red Cross and their participation in the handoff. Some have accused the Red Cross of being complicit here and failing the hostages. What do you make of that claim?
I completely agree with that claim. The Red Cross have not done anything at all for the hostages in 16 months. They have not even passed one prescription, one medicine. Some of the hostages died because they didn't get the medicine that they needed. And the Red Cross has been uninvolved and uninterested to help. The only time the Red Cross show up is to become a taxi service to bring the hostages from Hamas to the border with Israel. And they don't seem to understand that Hamas need them more than they need Hamas, in which case they should have actually made more of an effort to be involved with the hostages. What they do seem to always be involved in is the prisoners, the terrorists with blood on their hands that Israel holds, and it seems they're way more bothered by the release and the farce than the farce that the ceremonies of the release hostages do. They stand on stage with Hamas. They sign certificates of Hamas. They're part of the farce of Hamas. And really, they really care about the prisoners with blood on their hands coming out of Israeli jails and their well-being.
Now, Hamas has taken hostages before, most notably taking a BBC journalist in 2007 and releasing him after 4 months in an immense amount of international pressure. Now, did the international community fail in putting enough pressure on Hamas?
Absolutely. And the BBC reporter has disappeared, never speaks about it. And the BBC, of course, forgets that one of their own was taken hostage because their coverage has been ridiculous to the point that the week that the 3 hostages came out looking completely emaciated, they spent the whole week doing damage limitation for Hamas as if they were their propaganda arm, saying that the prisoners in Israeli jails also looked emaciated. They couldn't find one picture of an emaciated prisoner because most of them, all of them, are getting 3 square meals a day because Israel actually abides by its international obligations of the Geneva Convention. So yes, the BBC has completely forgotten that one of their own was taken hostage. It was the international pressure that got him released, and they have done nothing except blame Israel for a war we didn't start and for a massacre that we certainly didn't want.
Now, Hamas is claiming, without evidence so far, that the Bibas family were killed in an Israeli airstrike. Now, do we know if this is true, and does it matter given that they were celebrating around the coffins?
We don't know this is true. The Hamas are genocidal terrorists who lied. They actually asked one of the female hostages to stage her own death in order to do psychological warfare on her parents and her family and the country. Daniela Gilboa, she talks about it. And so how could you believe a genocidal terrorist group? But ultimately, they're to blame. Israel started attacking in order to get back our hostages, in order to get back our deterrents from a genocidal group that has in its charter to destroy Israel. So whatever happened, Hamas is to blame for taking babies from their cribs as hostages.
Now, in regards to the crowds that surrounded the coffins, at many points seeming to celebrate their deaths, how should the international community understand what the views of Gazans are?
Well, I think it's very clear what the views of Gazans are. We saw it from the beginning of the hostage release when you saw a bunch of gangster terrorists surrounding these women who looked so helpless. We saw them push around and harass an old man when he was released. And now we've seen them celebrate 4 coffins. And we don't just see adult men, we see women, we see children, we see the whole family. And this is part of the death cult, the terrorist cult, that gives us very little hope for any type of peaceful resolution with them in the near future.
Well, this it hasn't been released yet, but what will the next phase of the ceasefire look like? And as I mentioned, obviously Israel is not happy with the outcome right now. 2 children's bodies were just returned to Israel. So, what is the reaction from Israel right now going into this next phase?
Again, it's so difficult to do a deal essentially with the devil, which is
Mhm.
what we did and what we're going to have to continue to do. What Hamas want is clear. They want the end of the war. We want the end of Hamas's rule, but we also want our hostages back. And this is the dilemma that we find ourselves in. Are we going to have to completely stop the war to get our hostages back? That's what they want. I think Israel has to do everything that it can to get our hostages home, including stopping the war. And if we have to go back to it at a future time, then we should. But we should get all those living hostages home. And if we can, of course, the dead ones, so that their families can put them to rest.
And in this situation, is a ceasefire the answer? Is that what's going to bring the most peace in the long run?
Well, this is a Sophie's choice that Israel has. That's the choice that we've had. Is it smart to release 40 prisoners for every 40 terrorists for every hostage? Terrorists with blood on their hands, terrorists who've gone back to terrorism. 80% of the terrorists released in deals go back to terrorism. Is that smart? No, it is not a deal, it's an extortion. But Israel has a very strong ethos that no man or woman is left behind. The government let down those people on October 7th. And so we have a moral and ethical obligation to bring them home. And what happens after that has to be the government's resolve. But at the moment, the priority should be getting everybody home at whatever price. We can come back to whatever it is that we're doing afterwards.
Thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you.